Good foggy morning, third grade. I am out here again in the llama pasture. The temperature is actually pretty nice. It's just muggy out. I've called all the llamas, but they're just standing right over here. They're not wanting to come over. So I'm gonna do my best, but we'll see. I think they think it's a trap. I'm gonna keep today's kind of short. We've got chapter 10, the Marauders map. We're just starting that. Just a heads up. Miss Rachel's coming to get her book back because remember this is her read aloud book, so I've ordered it on Amazon Prime, but I don't know how fast it will be here. As soon as it is here, I will start read alouds again, but if you don't have one for a day or two, that's what's going on. So I should have ordered my own, but I just thought she was going to let me borrow it for longer. So anyway, Madame Pomfrey insisted on keeping Harry in the hospital wing for the rest of the weekend. He didn't argue or complain, but he wouldn't let her throw away the shattered remains of his Nimbus 2000. He knew he was being stupid, knew that the Nimbus was beyond repair, but Harry couldn't help it. He felt as though he'd lost one of his best friends. He had a stream of visitors, all intent on cheering him up. Hagrid sent him a bunch of earwiggy flowers that looked like yellow cabbages, and Ginny Weasley, blushing furiously because remember she got like a crush on Harry, turned up with a get well card she had made herself, which sang shrilly, like really high-pitched, unless Harry kept it under his bowl of fruit. The Gryffindor team visited again on Sunday morning, this time accompanied by Oliver Wood, who told Harry in a hollow, dead sort of voice that he didn't blame him in the slightest. Ron and Hermione only left Harry's bedside at night, but nothing anyone said or did made Harry feel any better, because they only knew half of what was troubling him. Ooh, do you remember why he's not telling everybody? He hadn't told anyone about the Grim. Not even Ron or Hermione, because he knew Ron would panic and Hermione would scoff. The fact remained, however, that it had appeared twice, and both appearances had been followed by near-fatal accidents. The first time, he had been nearly run over by the night bus. The second, he had fallen 50 feet, minimum, from his broomstick. Was the Grim going to haunt him until he actually died? Was he going to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder for the beast? And then there were the Dementors. Harry felt sick and humiliated every time he thought of them. Everyone said the Dementors were horrible, but no one else collapsed any time they come around. No one else heard echoes in their head of their own dying parents. Ooh. For Harry knew who that screaming voice had belonged to now. He had heard her words, heard them over and over again during the night hours in the hospital wing when he lay awake, staring at the strips of moonlight on the ceiling. When the Dementors approached him, he heard the last moments of his mother's life. Her attempts to protect him, Harry, from Lord Voldemort, and Voldemort's laughter before he murdered her. Harry dozed fitfully, which means like he dozed but kind of like was having fits, like not dozing or falling asleep well. Sinking into dreams full of clammy, rotted hands and petrified pleading, jerking awake only to dwell again on the sound of his mother's voice. It was a relief to return on Monday to the noise and bustle of the main school, where he was forced to think about other things, even if he did have to endure, or put up with, Draco Malfoy's taunting. Malfoy was almost beside himself with glee that the Gryffindors had lost. He had finally taken off his bandages from his arm from the hippogriff, still had those bandages on, and celebrated having the full use of both arms again by doing spirited imitations, or excited imitations, of Harry falling off his broom. Malfoy spent most of their next potions class doing the Dementor imitation across the dungeon. Ron finally cracked, flinging a large, slippery crocodile heart at Malfoy, which hit him in the face and caused Snape to take 50 points from Gryffindor. If Snape is subbing in defense against the dark arts again, I'm going back sick, said Ron, as they headed towards Lupin's classroom after lunch. Check who's in there before I go in, Hermione. It's okay. It's Professor Lupin. He was back at work. He certainly looked as though he had been ill. His old robes were hanging more loosely on him, and there were dark shallows beneath his eyes. Nevertheless, he smiled at the class as they took their seats and they bust out at once in an explosion of complaints about Snape's behavior while Lupin had been ill. It's not fair. He was only filling in. Why should he be able to give us homework? Yes, hi. Thank you very much. We don't know anything about werewolves. Stop. We don't know anything about werewolves. 2 rolls of parchment. Did you tell Professor Snape we haven't covered werewolves yet? Lupin said, frowning. Oh, just a second. Llama, go away. Delight, shoo. It's not fair. He was only filling in. Why should he set us homework? We don't know anything about werewolves. 2 rolls of parchment. Did you tell Professor Snape that you had not covered them yet? Lupin asked, frowning slightly. The babble broke out again. Yes, but he said we were really behind. He wouldn't even listen. 2 rolls of parchment. Professor Lupin smiled at the look of indignation on every face. Don't worry, I'll speak to Professor Snape. You do not have to do the essay. Oh no, said Hermione, looking very disappointed. I've already finished it. Could you stop? They had a very enjoyable lesson. Professor Lupin had brought along a glass box containing a hinky-punk, a little one-legged creature who seemed as though it was made of wisps of smoke, rather frail and harmless looking. It lures travelers into bogs, said Professor Lupin as they took notes. You notice the lantern dangling from its hand? It hops ahead and people follow the light. Then the hinky-punk made a horrible squelching noise against the glass. When the bell rang, everyone gathered up their things and headed for the door, Harry with them. But wait a moment, Harry, Lupin called. I'd like a word. Ugh. Harry fell back and watched Professor Lupin covering the hinky-punk's box with a cloth. I heard about the match, said Professor Lupin, turning back to his desk and starting to pile books into his briefcase, and I'm so sorry about your broomstick. Is there any chance of fixing it? No, said Harry. The tree smashed it into bits. Lupin sighed. They planted the Whomping Willow the same year that I arrived at Hogwarts. People used to play a game, try to get near enough to touch the trunk. In the end, a boy called Davy Gugden lost an eye, and we were forbidden to go near it. No broomstick would even have a chance. Did you hear about the Dementors too? Said Harry with difficulty. Lupin looked at him quickly. Yes, I did. I don't think any of us have seen Professor Dumbledore quite that angry. They've been growing relentless for some time, those Dementors, furious that he won't let them inside the grounds. I suppose they were the reason that you fell? Yes, said Harry. He hesitated, and then the question he had to ask burst from him before he could stop himself. Why? Why do they affect me like that? It has nothing to do with weakness, Professor Lupin interrupted sharply, as though he had read Harry's mind. The Dementors affect you worse than others because there are horrors and trauma in your past that others don't have. A ray of wintry sunlight fell across the classroom, illuminating Lupin's gray hairs, or like bringing to light, shining on Lupin's gray hairs, and the lines on his young face. The Dementors are among the foulest creatures that walk this earth. They infest the darkest, filthiest places. They glory in decay and despair. They drain peace, hope, and happiness out of the air around them. Even Muggles can feel their presence, though they can't see them. Get too near a Dementor, and every good feeling, every happy memory will be sucked out of you. If it can, the Dementor will feed on you long enough to reduce you to something like itself. Soulless and evil. You'll be left with nothing but the worst experiences of your life, and the worst that has happened to you, Harry, is enough to make anyone fall off their broomstick. You have nothing to feel ashamed of. This makes me think of like a lot of students, even students in our classroom or other kids that we might know in the school or just in the community that have had a lot of trauma in their past. We've talked a lot about what trauma is and bad things that have happened to them and how it might affect their behaviors, today and in the future, and how that has an impact on them and how they think and how their brain develops even. And I think that's a huge thing that J.K. Rowling, the author, was trying to kind of allude to with the whole Dementors. I think that she's trying to really get across to people that, your past and your history and the things that you've gone through have a big effect on how you handle things in the present. And so sometimes we need to give people some extra grace when those kind of things happen, when they fall off their broomsticks. So just a thought. When they get near me, Harry stared at Lupin's desk, his throat tight. I can hear Voldemort murdering my mom. Lupin made a sudden motion with his arm, as though he had made to grab Harry's shoulder, but thought better of it. There was a moment's silence, then, Why did they have to come to the match? Said Harry bitterly. They're getting hungry, said Lupin coolly, shutting his briefcase with a snap. Dumbledore won't let them in the school, so their supply of human prey has dried up. I don't think they could resist that large crowd at the Quidditch pitch. All that excitement, all those emotions running high, it was their idea of a feast. Azkaban, which is the wizard prison, must be terrible, Harry muttered. Lupin nodded grimly. The fortress is set on a tiny island way out to sea, but they don't need walls and water to keep the prisoners in. Not when they're all trapped inside their own heads from the Dementors. Incapable of a single cheerful thought, most of them go crazy within weeks. But Sirius Black escaped from them? Harry said slowly. He got away? Lupin's briefcase slipped off his desk. He had to stoop to catch it. Yes, he said, straightening up. Black must have found a way to fight them. I wouldn't have believed it possible. Dementors are supposed to drain a wizard of his powers if he is left with the Dementors for too long. You made that Dementor on the train back off, said Harry suddenly. There are, certain spells, certain defenses one can use, said Lupin. But there was only one Dementor on the train. The more there are, the more difficult it becomes to resist. What defenses? Said Harry at once. Can you teach me? I don't pretend to be an expert at fighting Dementors, Harry. Quite the contrary. But if the Dementors come to another Quidditch match, I need to be able to fight them. Lupin, Wyatt Clark, what are you doing? What? No. What in the name of Springville are you doing with all those cubbies? What are you putting? How many of those are even yours? How many of those do you have stuff in? 4? 1, 2, 5. You have 5 cubbies with your thing. Sit down. Nope, don't even try to clean them out. Don't. Cannot handle. Just sit down, please. No, I love you. Sit down. Sit down. Thank you. Thank you. Lupin looked into Harry's determined face, hesitated, and then said, Well, all right. I'll try and help, but it'll have to wait until the next term, I'm afraid. I have a lot to do before the holidays. I chose a very inconvenient time to fall ill. What with the promise of the anti-Dementor lessons from Lupin, and the thought that he might never have to hear his mother's death again, and the fact that Ravenclaw flattened Hufflepuff in their Quidditch match at the end of November, Harry's mood took a definite upturn. Gryffindor were not out of the running after all, although they could not afford to lose another match. Oliver Wood became repossessed with his manic energy and worked his team as hard as ever in the chilly haze of rain that persisted into December. Harry saw no hint of a Dementor within the grounds. Dumbledore's anger seemed to be keeping them at their stations at the entrances to the castle. And that is where I'm going to end for today, because then we're going to get into a whole nother scene. It's moved into December of this book. I hope that you guys are staying safe and doing well, and I hope to see some updates from you pretty soon. Like I said, if you don't hear anything, if there's no read aloud link for the next day or two, it's just because the book hasn't come, and I don't know, fingers crossed for Amazon Prime. All right, y'all, big smooch. I care about you a lot. I miss you. I'll talk to you soon.